The boroughs are New York City. The burbs are everywhere else. Real estate is the ultimate game of risk and reward. It's the biggest investment most people ever make. Fortunes are made over a lifetime and lost in a day. And we're not playing with monopoly money. How do you stay ahead? Who's buying? Who's selling? And why? What do they know? We want the truth. You need an edge. Boroughs and Burbs is your secret weapon, giving you the insider knowledge and strategies you need to succeed in the high-stakes world of real estate. From Palm Beach to Palm Springs, Manhattan to Malibu, we press the experts to expose the pain, find the deals, and occasionally predict the future. That's Boroughs and Burbs, Thursdays, 3 o'clock Eastern, noon Pacific. Because everyone can make money in real estate.
Welcome, everybody. Boroughs and Burbs, episode 156, season 4, being a successful buyer's agent. Today, I'm your host, John Engel. I'm ordinarily joined at this moment by Roberto Cabrera, but he's running a little late today. I've got two very special guests, both from California, Douglas Elliman's Beverly Hills office. I've got John Butler and Eli Karon. And let me see if I can pull up some visual aids. Okay, so that's Boroughs and Burbs. That's all 155 shows. You'll find them on the YouTube playlist. I want to thank Grace Farms for being our sponsor, sticking with us for the last 4 years. They've got a big event coming up. If you go to their event calendar, you're going to see that they've got the Philharmonic coming up next week, the 21st. There's Eli. You'll find him at elikaron.com. And Jonathan Butler, also in the management team in the Beverly Hills office of Douglas Elliman. And there's Eli's Douglas Elliman page. So you see that I'm not lying. I'm John Engel. You'll find me at johnengel.com or theengelteam.com. And that's Roberto Cabrera. He's at Brown Harris Stevens in New York City. And without any further ado, welcome, guys. Welcome, Eli. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Really glad to have you with us. So talk to me a little bit about where you came from and why you are my experts on being a successful buyer's agent.
I'm gonna let you go first, Eli, because you've actually been doing this longer than me, believe it or not.
All right, fair enough. Even though you know a heck of a lot more than I do. So I was born and raised in Santa Cruz. That's actually where I'm currently sitting, Santa Cruz, California. We're about 70 miles south of San Francisco. I left Santa Cruz when I was 18, went down to Los Angeles for school, stayed there for my 4 years. Wasn't ready to be done with school, so I spent a year in grad school in Texas, University of Texas, and I learned two things. I learned that I like Texas women, so I brought home a wife, and I learned that I didn't want to be a journalist, and so I started studying for my real estate broker's license while I was in grad school. So at 23, I had a broker's license. I returned to Los Angeles. I started working for my fraternity brother's mom, who was a big Beverly Hills agent at the time, and started learning the good, the bad, and the ugly of Beverly Hills real estate. And that was in 2006. And here we are, seems like the blink of an eye later. I have a somewhat unique business in that my license is hung with two brokerages. So I hang my license with Douglas Elliman in Beverly Hills, and then with our little family-owned brokerage in Santa Cruz. And I work both markets at a decent clip. And so it's kind of fun to go back and forth and go to LA and put on my Canali suit and then come back up north and put on my Patagonia short sleeve shirt. Those are my two uniforms.
And Jonathan, how did you come into the business?
Well, it's actually Eli's fault. Believe it or not, Eli and I played softball for many years before I actually got into real estate. And then I was just working with a couple independent brokers, friends of mine, doing REO, doing a bunch of working with some of the nonprofit and government-backed funds. And then I just helped Eli out with a listing and met some folks from Telus Properties, where we were before Douglas Elliman. And I guess the rest is history. And I just stopped saying, I never said no. Maybe this was my mistake. I kept being asked to do various things, and I eventually became the broker of record for Telus Properties and had an ownership interest in that company. And then we sold our company to Douglas Elliman. just over 7 years ago. And I became the broker of record for us in California. But yeah, so I became, after the acquisition of Telus Properties, which is a great luxury boutique brokerage, we had grown to 22 offices and 530 agents. Became the broker of record for Douglas Elliman in California. And I also currently manage our Brentwood office, which is luxury neighborhood on the west side of Los Angeles. And I also keep a sales business put together as well and keep that going, which is something that I will never give up for two reasons. Number one, I just enjoy it too much. And that's the part of real estate that really brought me into it, was working with clients, both buyers and sellers. But also number two, is the broker of the company and a manager and someone who leads a lot of trainings for our company. I think it's important for me to be having real conversations with real buyers and real sellers out in the marketplace. And I will tell you, in all of the risk mitigation, deal doctoring, help that I provide for agents and our clients alike, it's really been invaluable for that purpose.
All right. So this is what I'm hearing. But before I do, I'm going to introduce you to Scott Hobbs, because he also is running a small business where he is both the salesman and he is running the sales team. And so he's sharing some of the same issues that I'm having, you're having, which is, it's not enough to be a great salesman and come up and use that experience. Now, how do you train others around you and train a great sales team? And so it begs the fundamental question: can salesmanship be trained? Can it be learned? Or do you just have that natural, people talk about being a natural at sales or not. You have it or you don't. So I don't know if you or Scott have an opinion on whether it can be trained.
Go for it.
So the answer is yes and yes to both your questions. Can it be trained, and is it natural? If certain aspects of sales are natural, then you train to identify those natural skills that you have, hone them, and better them. If you feel like you don't have certain natural skills that you see that are stereotypically good sales skills, you can learn them. But part of that is learning who you are. Because the nice thing about sales and the nice thing about real estate is that there are so many different personalities of people, approaches to business, that are all successful and can be successful as long as you identify who you are and how you can best succeed in that market.
And I would concur. It's a combination. It's just sort of like saying, would you say being a good accountant is either natural or it's trained? And the answer is it's both. And as with sales, I mean, there's some people that the amount of training they need, they should not be in sales. They will never make a lot of money doing this, and they should not do this. But even those folks can end up learning how to be better salespeople and learn a lot of techniques along the way that will make their life better in both business and personal.
Yeah.
So the first half, so it occurs to me, and I'm going out of order here, but it occurs to me the first part of our job is to sell ourselves as a buyer's agent to somebody who wants to buy a house. That's the beginning of the process. You have to say, I'm a guy who knows my stuff. I'm a guy that you could work with. You can trust. You should work with me. And then the second half of the job is actually executing on all those skills that require me to know my market, to know my clients' needs, and be able to put them together and execute on the transaction. Let's talk about the first half of that, where I enter the business and I have to convince people to use me. That's the first part of, I guess, being a buyer's agent. Or if you're Mr. Hobbs here, you have to convince him. I mean, he has to go convince people to use him. So, I think it's the beginning of every sales process. I'm an expert, and I'm going to be fun to work with. So, work with me.
I think a lot of this depends on where you're getting your business. So are you meeting people at an open house and it's a cold lead, never met them before in your life? Is this a friend of a friend? Is this a family member? Is this a referral? Um, and those are all obviously very different things, but one of the things that we've done that has been really helpful is to take a step back and say, where are we getting our business? Right. And then we'll focus our dialogues and our efforts and our energies towards that funnel, but also we change our behavior based on where the lead is originating. So if I'm meeting somebody at an open house, it's a different approach. You have to work probably much harder to build rapport than, oh, this is Jenny's cousin. I sold Jenny 3 houses. Jenny's married to my brother-in-law, right? Like there's a lot of different connections that short circuit the rapport building aspect of picking up new clients. And I think with buyers in particular, that comfort is either immediate or it's earned pretty slowly over time. And I think that the source of the lead dictates how quickly that rapport is built and that comfort is earned.
But all of the examples you just cited rely a good deal on personal charisma. I meet somebody at an open house, I'm relying on my personality and my ability to make a connection in a short period of time with somebody who doesn't know me. And yet Jonathan and Scott just talked about being able to train somebody to be a good salesman. I didn't hear anything about personal charisma.
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, it's not a business connection, it's a personal connection first, right? So you connect on a personal level first, and that's, you can call it charisma, you can call it personality, you can call it being interested in somebody. I like the word charisma. I think charisma is really powerful, but I think that if you can connect personally, the business stuff almost fades into the background because I think people work with who they like and trust. And like and trust has nothing to do with market knowledge, sales history, list price to sales price ratios, negotiating abilities, the things that probably really matter in real estate, but it just matters, do they like you? And so when I'm the same way, John, when we're meeting people at open houses, it's searching for something to connect. What kind of a watch are they wearing? What kind of a dog do they have? What kind of a car did they drive up in? Have they mentioned gardening? Have they mentioned baseball? How can I connect with this human on a human level? And that's genuine, by the way. I think you have to be genuine about it. You have to be authentic. And if you're not, it's pretty transparent, I think. Because I've come into open houses with people and it's like, oh, this guy is cringy. You don't want to be the cringy guy.
Well, and I think that I'll focus on the word that I was hoping you were going to say, and you did. So you already got 1 point today, John. But that was connection. Because ultimately you need that connection. And I'm sure you guys have heard this, and Eli, poked on one of the spokes of this, but people have to, before they're going to do business with you, right? First, they have to know you, then they have to like you, and then they have to trust you. And only then will they do business with you. And I will say that without fail, that has remained true in anybody that I've done business with. And some of us probably have a more natural ability to get to that third spot quicker than some others. And that goes to what your point was, John. It's like, well, someone is not as good as a salesperson. It may take them longer to get to that trust point. And that could be a charisma thing. That could be a personality thing. That could be maybe a curiosity thing. So towards that idea of connection, if you can be genuinely curious, like the best way to connect with someone is to start asking questions. And I mean, the moment someone walks in, using the open house example, the moment they walk in, I'm asking questions after, of course, a nice greeting and a welcome. But I'm asking questions. I'm learning about them. I'm being genuinely curious. And the more curious you are, the more opportunities you uncover, and the easier it is for you to find ways to connect with them.
I want to boil this down into its parts. There's a lot of agents who are going to be watching this saying, I want the formula. I want something more predictable. I don't like all this squishy language. Scott Hobbs is running a $300 million business And he needs to know that he's got trained professionals on the front line bringing in business who are not just relying on personal charisma and chit chat in the first 5 minutes to make sure that his sales pipeline is, robust. So, it's funny when we get off this call, many of us are going to go back to a sales funnel mentality. I've got to go get in front of 100 people in order to yield 5 sales. And yet you haven't talked at all about the numbers. You haven't talked at all about a discipline. You've talked about connection, Jonathan, and charisma, Eli. So where why are we all focused on numbers if this is a game of personality and charisma?
It's a great question, because I think that what ends up happening is, in a lot of the coaching that exists out there, and a lot of the talk that exists out there, it is focused on this numbers aspect, right? And because then they figure, gosh, if I can just hit my quota and I get on some average conversion rate, then I will be able to get this. But you can't even start. You can't even start until you have the ability, or at least awareness, that you have to be able to connect with someone. And I've had some successful agents that they know they don't have the same level of charisma as others. They know it. And that's okay. Now, a lot of that we identify if we're looking at different personality traits, right? Or personality types, whether you want to do Myers-Briggs, whether you want to do disc profiling, whatever it is, right? You got to know who you are. And then you got to know who it is you're talking to. And that comes into that genuine curiosity. And then you can start to connect. And I think that the secret within all this, and Eli said it, is that it has to come from a genuine place. There are plenty of disingenuous people that are still successful, don't get me wrong. But I think the people that have long-standing businesses that don't turn over their people and actually start to accumulate growth from personal referral, and Eli will tell you where most of his business comes from, and mine as well, is that if you can figure out how to genuinely connect with someone and you are coming from an actual place where you really care, I promise you, you will have tenfold success over the person that doesn't and is just trying to get those numbers through.
Dale Carnegie, 101.
Yeah, I was
Mhm.
just gonna say that, Scott. Every single year I read How to Win Friends and Influence People, every single year, and I recommend everybody read it every single year. It is so powerful. You already know everything in there, and it's just a nice reminder and a good refresher to read it. Read it at the beginning of the year. Boom, you set yourself up, and you are actually genuinely invested in people's lives. It's not, and again, what John said, it's connecting, but it's not connecting on a business level. It's not, how do I make sure you're getting the best buy on this condo or this house? It's connecting on a personal level.
I was sitting there with Leslie in the office back in the days when you had the duty broker, and Leslie and I were experienced agents, and we were sitting in the back, and we watched the duty broker sitting in the window, and a couple saw one of our listings on the glass and came in and wanted more information about the listing in the window. And the duty agent started with, well, I need you to sign this paper because I need to establish that I'm the buyer broker and that you're my client. And those people turned around and left. And it was Leslie who said, your first job is to make them love you. And I'll never forget that. Your first job is make them love you. And well, it's what you've been talking about, personal connection. But I think that given a lot of the regulatory environment and changes in the rules and the emphasis that the state or NAR has made recently, particularly recently, on making sure that you establish the relationship, and that you get it signed. In fact, I just got an email saying, make sure that you get it in writing, from my broker. And so it's really hard because we're giving our agents two messages. We're saying, on the one hand, you can have a conversation with them and you can start to ask them, what are you interested in? And you can start to make suggestions that might meet those needs. On the other hand, we're also telling them in the very same breath that you represent the seller, and you have to, if you're going to represent the buyer, you've got to get them signed up that way. And there is no gray area. And the state's been very careful to emphasize that. And I think it's really hard for a lot of agents to reconcile those two challenges together. Want to comment on that?
So
Well, Eli will go first, then I'll give the broker response and how
yeah.
I've been training.
So I started using in California, buyer representation agreements are pretty uncommon up before August 17th. I started using them about 12 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. And for the same reason most people start using them, I got burned by a client and I thought to myself, what the heck are you doing? I'm not terribly interested in wasting my time. Let's start working with people who want to be serious. And so I started working on buyer representation agreements quite a while ago. And a few things crystallized. One is that the personal connection doesn't change. That has to happen before the appointment with the buyer representation agreement presentation occurs. And the second thing that happened is that the quality of the buyers was significantly better. The loyalty of the buyers was significantly better. The seriousness of the buyers was significantly better. And then this was unexpected, but the referrals down the line were significantly better. So if you've worked with somebody with whom you had a buyer representation agreement and they're referring you a friend or a family member a year from then or 2 years from then, and that friend and family member is already prepped by their friend that you're going to sign a contract, right? It's a scary word. You're going to sign a contract with Eli, then it's normalized. And all of a sudden it's not unusual. I was actually a little bit bummed when the NAR settlement statement happened because that was kind of my differentiating factor. For years, I was the only one. Well, I shouldn't say the only one. I was one of the few who did them regularly. And so, I thought, well, gosh, is this my secret sauce that's being given out now and everybody's going to do it? It's turned out to be a real positive for the industry and I'm not unhappy with it. But I guess my point is the personal connection still happens first, John, right? So you still meet that person in the open house, you still connect on some personal level, and you have to be genuine about it. And I think that's the it factor that you talked about. Some people care about others and other people don't. And I have family members and friends who don't care about other people, and they're still wonderful people. They just don't care, right? And I very much care, which is a blessing and a curse. But I care about what other people are doing and what they're interested in, who their family is and where they're from. And it's interesting to me. That's like, to John's point, that's why I'm in the business. I love
Right.
the client interaction aspect of it. But I think you have to really love it. That's probably the it factor. The teaching factor is all the other stuff. You can learn what questions to ask. You can learn how to set appointments. You can learn the contracts. All of that's kind of, I would say it's very doable. But the genuine interest in other people is probably, to me, what separates agents, great agents from agents who just aren't that interested in taking their business to the next level.
Yeah, and I'm gonna ask Eli a question before I go into my my part. But Eli, even up the last 12 years, did you ever assume that you were a particular person's agent until you signed a buyer representation agreement?
Never.
Great.
Never.
Nothing's changed. Guys, I mean, one of our challenges as leadership, and as I go through and talk about and work to train changes in policy, in settlement, in law, or whatever it may be, is a balance between making sure that people are abiding by it, they're doing the right thing, but that they're also not having their business suffer as a result of it. And how do you find that balance? And I feel like that is a big struggle for a lot of people, because when things change, people's immediate reaction is to either panic or wonder what's going to break. How is this going to break something? But rather, if we shift the mentality of like, oh, okay, I go this path now. And I've been saying this meeting after meeting, training after training for a year. Everything that you need to know, every skill that you need to possess to traverse this change, you already know it and you already possess it. And I firmly believe that because honestly, I'll still go out and host an open house. And my open houses are exactly the same as they always have been. And here's why. I never ever made the assumption that that person walking through the door was my buyer.
Same here. I was about to just say the same thing.
And
I
why
just want to
would
know
you? How
where
awkward
you
is that?
where are you coming from? What
Right.
caused you to come into this house on this day in the first place? You probably won't buy this house, but I want to understand the psychology of who's coming in and why. What are their motivations? How are those motivations changing?
Mhm.
Um, in the old days, before COVID, right? A couple of years ago, in the old days, commute was a very big deal. And
Yeah.
now I suspect that that commute is less of a big deal because more people can work from home more of the time. And I'm always testing that theory. So, if I ask them nothing else, it'd be like, oh, so you're looking at this suburban house. Do you work in New York? And that's what I want to know. And do you have to go in each day? Oh, no, I'm only working in the city 2 days a week. And that's why the hour and 15 commute isn't really such a big deal and why we're looking at this house. And I just want to know those kinds of things because it makes me a better broker.
Well, right, but doesn't it make you a better broker first for your primary objective, which is to sell the house for your seller?
Right.
And so
Right.
I think that we get too lost because again, you go back to your point, like, well, we have to figure out first, we have to be able to get clients before we can show the rest of the skills that make up a good agent, right? So there's two definitions of a good agent. There's someone that's really good at selling themselves and selling their services, and then there's agents who are really good at actually performing those services. And there are agents that are really good at this and bad at sales. And there's agents that are really good at sales, but bad at delivering the actual service. So where do you find that balance?
I
Um,
surround myself with people who are really good at providing the service. I know my limits.
well, right. And by the way, that's okay. And so this goes to acknowledging who you are, right? And how you actually go through and provide the service because you need to show your value. And I think for Eli and I, we both operate very similarly. We've actually worked with buyers together jointly numerous times. Um, and we we sh we tell them and they see our service by doing and our value by doing and also by case study. And that's why the personal referrals all help with that. But, going back with the training aspects for open houses or showing your own listing, or even, if you are I'll use Douglas Elliman because obviously that's our company, but if you're a Douglas Elliman agent hosting a fellow Douglas Elliman agent's listing, you are first a host for that seller and for that property. And you should have the same assumption that you're not that person's agent that walks through the door. So all that matters, if you've already decided you're not their agent, you can actually do a great job touring them through the property, welcoming them, doing everything you're supposed to do. And I tell agents all the time, if you show that you're a good agent for selling this property, that is going to be much more effective than you trying to like chummy up to them to become their agent. I promise you, your conversion on open houses will be 5, 10-fold what it would be if you just immediately go in and you're one of those cringe agents, as Eli was talking about, that is like just going in for the kill. Because those are the agents that you have your clients come and talk to you about when they went to someone else's open house, right? And then also those agents that are out there, and I know when we were prepping for the call, is something Robin had mentioned too. You have those agents out there, listen, if you're going to come through, you're going to have to sign something with me. And it's just patently false. Do you know that like no buyers have zero obligation to sign anything ever? They have zero obligation. It's you as the agent that has the obligation to get something signed to define your relationship and compensation if they want you to be their agent. And how many times have you had it happen where someone walks in the door of an open house and says, you know what, John, you seem great. I know we just met. It is John, right? I really want you to be my agent. It doesn't happen that way. And if it does, it's because they're trying to get some sort of angle on the property anyway, right?
So Roberto has joined us. Hello, Roberto.
I see the healing has begun without me. I can't believe it.
So earlier today, I said, why are you going to be late? You said, I'm working on a massive deal. And I said, are you representing the seller or the buyer? And you said the buyer. So we're all dying to hear, how did you meet your buyer? And how did you win them over? Through your personal charisma? Did they just say, this is a guy I want to hang out with? Because that's how I met you.
It was actually good fortune. I was representing a good property, and I was leaving for the Hamptons for the summer over a year ago in August, like 14 months ago. And we're literally in the car, getting my wife, get the sandwiches, get in the back. Okay, I got to take this call. And he called me and said, I see you represent this. I don't want that, but can you come over to my apartment and have a conversation with me? I was like, I'm just leaving on vacation, but I'll be back. And I came back the following week in the middle of vacation. Sat down, had a conversation with them, which is rare actually, to just go to someone's house, meet them, see their place, go through that entire process. And that's how I met him. We've been working, as we all know, truly working with buyers takes time. I tell everybody right from the start, manage their expectations. I never think that I'm going to get this done really fast. I always tell them straight off the bat, I say, look, this is going to take time. You got to see a lot of things. This is a journey. So let's, roll your sleeves up and, maybe in a year we'll be done, but let's go, because it takes work. And I listen a lot and I talk a lot, but I listen more. How do you like that?
This guy, what did he think he knew about you to call you in the first place?
He probably saw a video of the property or something and how I was talking or something.
I think that's a
really
really important part.
You know what? Through the process, I've met probably 5 different brokers who worked with him, and they never lasted. So I don't know. I was telling one broker who's a really good friend of mine, who does a tremendous amount of business, and I spoke to him and I was explaining, I have this client, this, and he goes, does this guy live here? Does he this? Does he that? And he's like, you have a lot of patience. I was like, I do. So he walked away. But hopefully I get paid.
We've been talking before you got here about that first ice-breaking moment, and how we, whether it's in the office or over the phone, our first contact, we typically don't know these people. I mean, it's great when we've been friends with them for years, but that's kind of rare. I mean, we have our sphere, and then we have the people that they reach out to and recommend us to. And then we get an opportunity, and through either personal charisma, personality, we get to develop a connection. That was the word we used. So we've been talking a bit about that developing of the connection, and we've been talking about whether that can be taught and trained in a sales force, or whether that just comes naturally. And then we talked about the fact that NAR and the regulatory environment has now added this additional pressure on many agents and said, you really have to establish a legal in writing relationship with somebody, and how that's thrown a lot of people off in the last couple of months, because they say, but I'm just trying to develop a relationship with them before I develop a relationship on paper with them. And so here we are.
I think that's very difficult, because when I go to my first, I may be meeting a buyer, I've had conversations with them, but when I meet a buyer for the first time, and usually the process with me is I take them and I show them 10, 15 things on the first day, right off the bat, 2 days. Because that you just want to see what the marketplace is. You just want to get them used to what's going on. And then it becomes one-offs. This comes on the market, this comes on the market. And I carry my phone and I go, and I just pal around with them, have conversations, tell them about buildings, tell them about the neighborhood, tell them things to be looking out for. And we just walk and talk. There's no pressure, nothing. It's very casual. And I've never, even when I was doing rentals, I never had people sign the registration agreements. I never liked it, never did it. And in my career, 26 years, I've probably lost maybe 2 or 3 buyers in the entire time. I've always generated tremendous loyalty. And I think it's just because I'm just very casual about it. And now this formalization of this almost right off the bat is something that's got me jarred. Like I've thought about it a lot. I need to think about it a lot more because I just need to settle. I need to place it in my mind so that it's just part of the conversation, but it's not something I've done. To me, that's like, here's my card. I don't like that. That's just not that's not how I function. So that's going to be a transition.
I think what you're saying
John,
there. Yeah, go ahead, Eli.
This is so interesting. Roberto, I've been working with buyer rep agreements for a really long time, far years and a decade before this NAR settlement. And so it goes to what John Butler said earlier, which is that there's a lot of ways to skin a cat in this business. That's what makes the business so great, right? You could have someone like Roberto who's super casual and generates this amazing loyalty and had very, very little fallout over a really long career so far. Or you could have people like me who say, hey, you know what? I don't want to have any fallout. And I know I'm going to lose people who don't want to sign agreements. And I'm okay with that because I'll justify it by saying, well, that person wasn't going to buy a house anyway. If they didn't want to work with me exclusively, they weren't never going to buy a house. And I've just spent 45 minutes presenting or an hour and a half presenting to save myself 6 months of runaround. And now I get to spend time on my mountain bike and with my kids and in my garden and, doing the things that I want to do, or with other buyers who are serious and do want to sign an agreement. So I think it's such an interesting, you could have 2 people who have successful businesses who do it totally differently. I think what Roberto will probably end up doing is the exact same thing he's been doing. And the signings will be super casual. Like, oh, by the way, yeah, we have to do this paperwork, feel free to read through it or however you're going to present it. My presentation was always super formal. You had to come into the office. You had to fill out a 5-page questionnaire. There were all these barriers to even get to sit down with me. And I know that sounds super arrogant and it's not the intent, but the goal was, are these people serious, right? So I have this 5-page questionnaire. John's heard this spiel 1,000 times, and they'd fill it all out. And I'd mine all this information from their questionnaire, and we'd learn about what kind of a house they liked and what was important to them and who their financial advisor was and their business manager and their attorney and their CPA. So we get all of this great data. And if they then showed up for the appointment, it was like, oh, they're serious, right? So I've talked to a ton of agents about this over the years, and some of them say, hey, I sit down in a room with somebody and I shake their hand and say, hey, are we going to work together? And that's a great way to do it, right? That's a process. And what I've always said from the beginning is as long as you have a process, then you're golden. You don't have to have a super formal sign this process. You don't have to have a super casual don't sign anything process.
That's what they say in the books is asking for the order, right? In the sales process, there's a moment in which you ask for the order.
Yeah,
and now we know how you ask for the order. There's a moment where you say, so you lean in and you say, right. So are we going to work together? Right. And it's not like, are we going to continue to hang out together? No. Are we going to work together?
Right.
And exactly. And I think that's a critical moment that we have to actually, consciously ask. We have to consciously develop that because we're just not pals and friends and looking at houses together.
Right.
Are we going to work together?
It's in New York. We don't have to do this yet. We're going to have to probably start doing this in January. But in Manhattan, the product is so different. Like we deal with co-ops, we deal with buildings, we deal with so many different issues that I think it's going to be, in some ways, it's going to be easier, I think, to get the loyalty from the buyer if they have to like really commit in that moment. But what I'm curious about is I have a client who I sold an apartment for him here. He also lives in Bedford. He has a house and he's thinking about buying another house and he's working with his broker. And she presented him with the agreement and he said, you haven't shown me anything that I didn't see online. So I'm not signing that. He's like, we're kind of working together, yeah, but I'm not signing that. What do you do in that situation?
I encountered that.
So,
Yeah, I mean,
but unless you're saying I've got these 7 off-market properties or what, I mean, and they, not that you don't bring value. Of course you do. We know the entire process, start to finish. It's like so nuanced and so complicated. But in a situation like that, puts you in literally a situation where you gotta kind of defend what you do. You gotta pull out. Well, I do this, I do that. It's like, how do you manage that?
well, I want to go back to something that you said, which you already know where you need to get. And that's you have to get of the mindset that this is a normal part of your business. And that's where you need to get to. Because the reason most agents never had buyer representation agreements signed, and Eli will tell you this, for almost as long as he's been getting them signed regularly, me and our fellow leaders have been trying to get agents to get buyer representation agreements signed. And they always push back because they have discomfort with the conversation. And their discomfort, I feel like, actually infuses the discomfort that the buyer ends up having with that conversation. But yet, if they're comfortable with the conversation, and this is a normal course of business, this is just what you do, this is how we do it, it becomes an easier conversation for the buyer to have. But so many agents, especially right now, are so fearful of the conversation. They're fearful of that, that example and 7 others that they can come up with about how this is going to be horrible for them. And they are paralyzed by those thoughts and those fears that they can't get to the normalcy that actually exists and get an agreement signed. And, if we think about it too, and this is something that Eli talks about in every single one of his buyer representation agreements, it's like, okay, would you agree to sell someone's house without signing something with them? No. Would you then agree to represent someone as their buyer's agent if they're buying a house without getting them signed? The answer is no. Not only because that's the right answer, because that has to be the answer. And so the technical answer to your question, Roberto, was what do you do in that situation where they says, I'm not signing that, but like, all right, cool, I guess we're not working together.
So you have to be okay. You have to be okay with no, right? You have to get real, and we're in a no business. I mean, we're in a business of failure. If you think about how many homes you show before you sell one, it's kind of like baseball. If you get 3 out of 10, those are Hall of Fame numbers, right? You're doing great. But
it's too black and white, though. It's too black and white. There's nuance to that. There's like, look, we just met. I'm asking you to sign something that is a commitment to work with me, and you don't really even know me.
Cool. I'll give you the nuance. I'll give you the nuance. You ready?
Yeah.
This is where we have to have smarter conversations about the agreement, right? Because guess what? There's not one standard for the terms of that agreement. So, for example, on your first day out, you're like, hey, listen, there's 10 properties I'm going to show you. They're all awesome for different reasons. They might work for you, they might not. We're going to sign a 1-day exclusive agreement. And within that 1-day exclusive agreement, if you buy any of these in the next 90 days, you're going to owe me compensation. If you go off and sign something else and do whatever, then that's fine. If you see something else tomorrow with someone else, I'm okay with that. Does that sound okay to you? The nuance exists in the type of agreement that we're signing with them. So I've talked to agents, be like, all right, you've got one house to see, sign your exclusive agreement for that one property. Start there. And that's where the nuance is. And I think that so often we're focused on, and this isn't just this issue. This is every issue that an agent encounters with a client. They decide first how it's going to break versus how I'm going to make it work. Like if you have a solution mindset, I do a Thursday call as well for our company in California, mainly about compliance and legal aspects of things. But today I talked about, what do you do when you're dealing with adversity in a transaction, and how do you approach it? And I think that when you're dealt a potential problem, if you immediately start looking for the solutions as opposed to everything that's going to break from it, you 9 times out of 10, you're going to win by having a solutions mindset versus the negative. And so yes, it's going to take some time. And of course, guys, all the things that you are saying that are potential bad things for this, yeah, they're all true. Great. Don't be upset with me, but get over it.
To the specific question, why, okay, but, you know, I understand, that you're going to show me these 10 and you want me to sign for these 10, but signing up with you as my buyer's agent, if I can see all these properties on online portals, can you tell me some of the things, some of the value add you provide, or is it all just a commodity? Can you give our agents out there 1, 2, or 3 things that add value to the process that maybe these buyers don't realize? Because it's a legitimate question. If I can find the properties on my own, do you add value?
Can I give you 7? I'll let Eli go first, and then I'll rattle off my 7.
So this was a big part of my presentation for years, and it still is I would, you know, we'd sit down with somebody, I'd say, you know, it used to be that brokers were the gatekeepers of properties. You used to have to walk into somebody's office, we'd open a big book, we'd flip the papers over, and you'd say, these are the properties that are on the market. And if you want to go see them, you have to come into a real estate office and come and see them. Or you happen to be driving by a house that had a for sale by owner sign, but most efficiently you would come into an office. Anybody with one of these, you have access. We're no longer the gatekeepers of property. That's no longer our value. So the value of the broker has not diminished. It has simply shifted. So my value to my clients is in negotiating and limiting their protracted liability throughout a real estate contract, right? Or excuse me, a real estate transaction. So, and I would say to a client, I would say, Roberto, are you a good negotiator?
Awesome.
You are. I believe it. I believe you are. I am too. So what do you negotiate for a living? What do you do every day for a living?
I negotiate.
And what kind of negotiations?
Let's just say I'm an attorney and I negotiate deals.
Great. Cool. Yeah. So let's say you're a business attorney, right?
Yeah.
That's great. So I can't negotiate a business contract because that's not what I do. But what I'm very good at is negotiating real estate contracts. I do that every single day. And so my value to you is that you get to continue negotiating business contracts because that's how you're going to make your money to afford this beautiful townhome you're looking to buy. I'm going to continue negotiating real estate contracts on your behalf. So you get to leverage my time, my energy, my money into your benefit. And it doesn't cost you a thing until you get what you want at the price you want. Is there anything that is bad about that for you?
Well, and the other thing too is, Roberto, as an attorney, are you negotiating on your own behalf or on behalf of your clients?
On behalf of my clients.
Right. Are your clients equipped to negotiate on their own these settlements, these contracts?
A lot of them think they do. They can't.
Gosh, I mean, can you imagine working in an industry, Roberto, where someone came in and said, "Don't worry, I can negotiate on my own behalf"?
I gotta stop. I gotta stop you. I'm uncomfortable with this word. I'm a good negotiator because you know what? I can't prove it. I can't see it. I can't see it. And most of these buyers, would-be buyers, don't really understand the value of it. Right? There's $1 million house. I found it on the online portal. I want to go see it. They think, you know, the price has already been established and published everywhere. I'm going to go to the open house. It's going to be a dozen people making offers on Monday by noon. And so what value does Roberto provide me anyway? I mean, negotiation, right? I put in my number. Engel puts in his number, Scott puts in his number, and we're done, right?
Yeah.
So can we paint them as good buyer agents who are getting asked that question in the first 5 minutes? Can we paint them a picture where they can actually see value being added along the way without using abstract concepts like, I'm a good negotiator? Why is that even important?
Yes, we can. So the empirical data, the data set part of this is easy. It's if you have some sales under your belt, and it's a little harder for a newer agent, but not impossible. I used to pull up all my listings from the last, say, 3 years, right? And I would show my list price to sales price ratio of homes that I listed for sale. And let's say it would be 106% list price to sales price. So I would sell, on average, my homes would sell for 6% above the list price. Then I'd show my buyer transactions over that same period of time. And my buyer transactions would be list price to sales price ratio would be, let's say 99.5. So on average, that spread is 6.5 percentage points. So the difference in representing a buyer in the market in the same period of time, same market period, right? So it doesn't matter if it's an up or down market versus representing a seller. That's empirical data that you can see that I can show a potential client. Hey, when I'm representing a buyer, they're getting their properties for on average 5%, half of a percentage point below the list price. And when I'm representing you as a seller, and I know you're not a seller yet, John, but when you do sell your house with me, we're probably going to get you up close to 6% above the list price when we sell it. So I want you to think about that when we're talking about what our fees are, and you're a good negotiator and I'm a good negotiator, and I've just proven it to you that I'm a good negotiator, and you're saying I'm going to take you at face value. We're going to be able to negotiate more than a few percentage points up and down here, right? We're going to, with the power of us combined, we're going to be able to negotiate a lot of money off of this transaction, or a lot of money above your sale, or, hey, don't worry about the sales price. The goal is to get the house, right?
That's the
A
goal.
great
and that's
negotiator gets a
define the
buyer
win.
a house at the price they want, the price that they're happy to pay. So don't
So-
worry about if we're getting it below the list price. Just worry about if you're getting the house you want and you're comfortable with the payment.
Well, and I think the second thing that you're pointing on, so you've got the empirical data, you can show numbers and stats and all that, which is helpful, and it can be dynamic. But also, I think that we have to go towards actually defining what negotiations are and what really defines a successful negotiation, right? Because to me, a successful negotiation is finding out if a deal exists and then actually putting it together. A successful negotiation ends up with like both parties in an actual consummation of a deal. So if I'm a good negotiator for you, regardless of what price you pay, because you're never going to pay something more than you are willing or wanting to pay. So that's already set. But I'm going to help you get the deal or identify the deal that you don't want. And negotiating also has to do with defining value within the negotiation you're a part of, value in your client's offer and helping communicate that. And there's all sorts of other aspects of negotiation that are more than, gosh, I didn't get $10,000 off of some other arbitrary number. That's not actually where it always is going to exist. So I think that there are a lot of agents, and you guys have encountered them, that think they're great negotiators because they will stick to a position or they'll hold off on something else, right? But yet, like, you end up having a bad taste in your mouth and your buyers don't actually perform as strongly as they normally would, right? Because of the just dynamics surrounding the negotiation. But I'm also good at like basically setting the playing field. And it's a place where you love to be, you're happy to be there, maybe you feel respected, but you also are going to perform your strongest. And I'm going to have a seller perform their strongest for you as the buyer and help you perform your strongest, because even the concoction of the terms of the offer, they got there because I was already negotiating on your behalf by learning as much as possible from the seller, already knowing as much about the market as possible from the listing agent and from just my natural experience in that marketplace. From everything else that I do, it's going to put you in the best position possible to get the property you want at the price and terms you want. That's a good negotiator.
You know,
I think that just simply, I think we ought to just point out that the finding of the property, it really only represents 10% of the work that gets done. And maybe you'll find it, maybe I'll find it. But then there's the showing of the property, and I'll bet that I know something about all the other houses around it or all the other buildings around it. And I also know how this agent works on the other side, and she knows me. And then there's timing, and then there's inspections, and then what you can get away with in an inspection and what you can't. So in 30 seconds, I can describe for you the other 90% of where I can add value along the process.
Yeah. Do you want my list of 7? We've already actually covered 3 or 4 of them. So the first point of value is strictly your duty that you owe to the buyer. If you know you have someone that is working on your behalf, that they have to put your interests above their own, that in and of itself represents value. And you can argue how much that is or not. Second is negotiations. We've talked about that. I think we hit that. The third is your knowledge of the market, your ability to analyze the market, and also that property's value within that market. That is probably one of the biggest ones. And guess what? A lot of you agents are not as good at that as you think you are. I hate to say it, because you're not actually in the market anymore. You're not going and seeing the inventory. You're not knowing what's happening or looking at it through the right lens. But you have to have that. Number 4 has to do with just your local knowledge and guidance in general, right? And this goes to something that Eli said when he is farming all that data from the buyer, and John, you mentioned this earlier too, identifying what it is that they want and how this property satisfies or doesn't or could satisfy the criteria for that buyer. That's actually a skill. And that goes into showing the property, right, John? Like when you're showing the property, like, hey, I know you wanted 3 bedrooms and maybe a 4th and this and that. If this is the right location, because now this is way up at the top of location, but yet you're giving a little bit on the stats of the house, here's where you can fix that. Here's where you can't, right? Real estate is just a series of trade-offs. That's all it is. It's a series of trade-offs. Your 4th is going to be your contracts and your execution of the contracts, knowing the contracts, knowing how to put together deals, because the ease of execution of that and actually walking them through it provides a lot of value, and people are just scared of it in general. The 6th is going to be your reputation, and I like to say your market equity. So your reputation matters. And I can give you 7 examples off the top of my head in the last 3 years where I have gotten a buyer a deal because of my reputation and or market equity.
I just told Roberto that an hour ago. He said, I'm having difficulty. My deal's going sideways. And I was like, well, did you tell him that, it's you? That, that you're giving them your assurance that it's going to happen? The things are going to happen the way they expect they're going to happen? And Roberto said, I don't think you understand the way things work in New York City.
No, no, but what he's saying is exactly right. I mean, there are situations where it's because of my reputation that if there's a comp that's been given or from 1 or 2 buildings, I can call the broker who sold that and say, listen, can you tell me a little bit more about that deal? Was, who paid the flip tax there? What happened? Was there anything funny about the deal? Then I can come back and tell the other broker who I'm negotiating with, say, listen, you gave us this comp, but the reality of that situation is this, 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 and this. And it's because I know all of these other brokers everywhere, and I can ask them different things. It's about that community of being out there for so many years, and the fact that you've walked through how many apartments in a year? You've walked through 5 because you went to go to dinner at all your friends' house. I go through 1,000 apartments a year. So,
you did just hit on about 5 of his value points in that story.
But that's the point. That's exactly the point. So we're extracting these, the last of them, and you said this, John, too. I have just inspections and really the escrow process for us in California. I know it's different in New York a little bit, and I don't claim to know everything that you guys do from contract to close. But in California, your participation contract to close in some ways is the majority of your value at that point, just being able to navigate, because we don't have attorneys out here even facilitating. There's plenty of times as the broker of record, I tell people you need to get legal advice because we're not attorneys. But by and large, the majority of our sales happen without any participation or commentary or conversation with an attorney at all, right? So you have that as another value add in our state and other escrow states possibly, specifically. So, but I think that going back to the reputation and market equity, when a seller accepts an offer, right? And knowing that I work with both buyers and sellers, so does Eli, so does Roberto, so does John, right? And you have to work with, I think it's helpful to have both sides of the coin. You know what makes a seller tick, and you also know what things motivate a seller to accept an offer, right? And it's like price and terms, but also surety of closing. And that's where my reputation comes in. I
I
can
call
tell
that
you,
reliability.
yes.
And I say, well, on Monday morning, when they get 3 offers and they're all very similar,
Yep.
they're going to be looking for the one that's reliable.
Yeah. I remember we were against 5 offers. My clients were contingent upon selling their house that wasn't even on the market yet. And we won that because the broker and then the seller believed I could get it done because I showed them when I've done it 10 other times. I've laid it out for them. They could see the path to closing. Even just knowing how to create and show that path to closing is something that buyer's agents don't know how to do well enough. And, or even if they do know how to do it, they're too lazy to take the time to present their offer in a way. I mean, maybe that's another way. My way of presenting an offer. We could pull out 24 other little sub items of value. I mean, there's so much that goes into it, guys. And you know, I've learned a ton of things from Eli and working with him as a buyer's agent, because he takes a lot of pride in it. But that pride is also important because that has to do with his genuine curiosity and care about people, but also a pride in doing a good job. I said, guys, a closed transaction by itself is just a C, right? I get it. C's pass, whatever. C's to get degrees, right? But like, I want to get an A on every transaction. I want to get my 5-star review. I want whatever it is. Like, I want to get an A because that A gets me more clients and also makes my current clients happy and pleased with what's happened. And that's super important.
I had so many more questions about how we get our clients and all that, but I think it was worthwhile to talk for, an hour about the value propositions. I think, I think that's where the rubber meets the road. But now I'm going to turn to Scott Hobbs and say, what did you learn? What did you learn this hour, Scott Hobbs? What did you hear?
I like the reminder again to go back to Dale Carnegie. Always go back to it and come back on that. I mean, a lot of these things they're all the great. Sales process is just such a weird concept on things, and it's not just getting people to like you. I mean, there's so much that goes into it, and you have to develop this process, and you have to train it, and you have to work together, and it's good to have a partner to bounce things off of, and it's good to do after action reviews and really, see how do you get better at it? How do you improve this skill? And I think
When you go on when you go on a sales call, do you bring somebody with you to train them or to get a second person listening? I try and do that.
We always like to have at least 2 people, and it just helps to be able to bounce stuff back and forth, and people, the other guy will catch something that you don't, guy or gal will catch something that you don't, and that's always very helpful. And then afterwards, it's good to talk about it. And I don't think we've ever had a sales call, even a great one, that you didn't come away going, missed an opportunity there, weren't paying as much attention as we should have.
Anytime I bring Melissa with me and then we come back after the sales call, she says, I talk too much. So I don't bring her with me anymore. I bring somebody else.
You don't want somebody to tell you that?
So, final thoughts, Jonathan, Eli. This has been a phenomenal show. I've really enjoyed this. I think we should do another one because I think the buyer agency is so important to so many of our listeners, and it's applicable in Beverly Hills, New York, Connecticut, wherever we are. And
I'll give a couple final thoughts, John. You had asked us, what advice would you give new agents entering the field as buyer's agents today?
Don't
Roberto
enter the field.
Yeah, no, it's the best business in the world, first of all.
Yes.
Number one, I would say, is know your inventory. And Roberto hit on it, walk through 1,000 apartments a year. I used to actually, there's a great app I used to use called Tally Track, and I would keep track of how many homes I would see. And I would tell my clients, I tell my buyers, hey, last year I saw 675 houses. Why does that benefit you? It benefits you because anytime you pull up a house, you're going to ask me about it. I'm going to know everything around it, and we'll know where it's positioned in the marketplace, right? It's going to put you at a huge advantage. The other thing is I would be kind to people, right? Be nice to other agents, start building that market equity, start building that reputation, because it takes a really long time to build and it takes a really short time to lose. You can lose it in the blink of an eye, but but I cannot overstate how important your relationships with other agents are. And that was probably the single biggest mistake I made as a young agent, was viewing my colleagues as adversaries rather than as collaborators. And I think it's a foolish young person's default. But when you really embrace others and be kind and help others, it comes back tenfold, and it will get you and your clients a lot more successful transactions.
Yeah, I would.
You know, I learned you got to carry a pen.
Yeah, just got to carry it. It's fine. Just be like, get used to signing something, buyer. You're going to be signing a lot of stuff.
Right.
Get used to it. I think that when I talk to new agents coming in, just piggybacking on what Eli had said, I said, if you start with one house, start with one property, because a new agent's not going to be able to see 1,000 homes, 674 homes, whatever. But start with one and learn everything you can about it, and then tell everyone you meet about it. And then that process, then you get the next one, and then the next one. It's going to be faster and easier. Now that's how you get to know the inventory. And that's how you also sound like you know what you're talking about, because you actually went through, but start with one. And the other thing is, when you're working with a client, just even if you don't know everything, right? Find the people that do, but also just make sure that your main focus is on satisfying every need and question of your client. And if your focus is 100% on your client, you can't fail. Because if you don't know the answer, but you know you're going to get it, that's worth more than 50% of the agents out there. It totally is. And you really have to care about it. And I mean, and Eli knows this, and we're sewn from the same cloth as far as this goes, but like, we really care a lot about our clients' experience. And we both really enjoy working with buyers as well. And all of the things that agents complain about, buyers are liars, I got to drive everywhere, I got to do all that.
Nonsense.
I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to do it, and I'm excited to do it. And sometimes I find myself pushing my clients. They're like, oh, what is this one? I said, listen, they're open for another hour. Let's go. And lo and behold, that's the one they buy.
Also, guess what buyers become?
Sellers.
Sellers. And guess what
Yeah.
they become after they sell?
We all start
Buyers
off as a
again.
buyer's agent before
Yeah,
we
there's
become a
two
seller's
sides.
agent.
There's two sides to every transaction. It's craziness to disregard 50% of the business.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally
Well
agree with John.
said.
Way more emotional payoff also to help a buyer, in my opinion. Think about the journey you go through with a buyer in their house. They have kids, they get married, they get divorced, they fight cancer, they have a
Hopefully
birthday
not.
party.
Hopefully not.
But I mean, these things happen, right? This is our reality. And you get to join them on that journey. You help a seller sell a house, and it's like, oh, yep, see ya. House is gone. So it's a great business, part of the business as well. But the emotional payoff you get from helping buyers is really valuable. It kind of feeds the soul.
Feeding the soul. I want to express my sincere gratitude to awesome guests. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Eli. This has been a great show. And thank you, Roberto. And thank you, Scott Hobbs. You were awesome. If you like real estate like we do, then please spread the word, hit the share button, hit the like button, and spread the word. And you can find this show on YouTube, where you're going to find all 156 episodes. And I think, Roberto, we're coming up next week. Maybe we're in Dubai next week, maybe?
I think.
Yeah, from Beverly Hills to Dubai. Boroughs and Burbs, we've got it all. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks,
this
guys.
has been
Really
phenomenal.
appreciate it. Sorry for being late.
And we will schedule a part 2 on this, because we got a lot more to say. Thank you, everybody. Bye.